Alright guys, so I'm just booting up one of the servers and I need to set up the RAID array, and we've been getting a lot of questions about this, and I thought I'd try and explain in as much detail as I can about RAID. I'm only going to be going over RAID 0, 1 and 1 plus 0 guys. Now there's two types of RAID, like hard RAID and software RAID. Now we've got a physical RAID controller built into the motherboard of this server. And sorry guys, I'm just waiting for the machine to boot. And to get into this RAID menu, you want to keep holding the F8 button guys, because this is hidden and it doesn't actually tell you how to get into the array. So we're going to enter the HP RAID array setup, and then I am going to explain a little bit more about how this works. So just let this get up guys. I'm going to bring some of the notes up that I've written. So we want to press F8 and it's telling us that a new disk has been inserted. Right guys, so inside the RAID array, so we're now inside the RAID array, sorry, and you can see the 4 disks, and we've got the option RAID 0 and RAID plus 1 and 0. So guys, to begin, I've got 4 hard drives here, and let's just start with 2. And to explain this in the best way possible, let's start with RAID 0. So let's just pretend we've created a RAID 0 an array. Now this array is going to create 1 hard drive out of these 2 disks in theory. Now both of these disks are, let's just pretend they're the same size, so 1 terabyte each. Now with RAID 0 we're able to use all of the capacity of both of these hard drives, because after we've created this array, when we create a single file on the disk, so myfile.txt, when this file's being written, what it does is it stripes the data between the 2 drives. So file A is now being written to both of these drives at the same time, but split into 2 sectors, so A and B. Now this is great for performance, but we've got no fault tolerance on this. So for example, if this drive fails, we've now lost all our data. But if we was to add another drive guys, we have now increased the performance of our RAID array, because we've got 3 drives now striping data between 3 of them. So when this writes data, it's now going to write data between these 3 hard drives. But again, the down failure is guys, if we lose even one of these drives, we still have lost everything. Now, you know, we could have multiple drives here guys. We could have 5 drives, and it doesn't matter what drive fails. If we lose any of those drives, we've now lost all of our data. Now this is great for performance, because obviously guys, let's say we're doing multimedia work, or we've got files that need to be read or written to at very high speeds. Well, think about what this is now doing. This RAID array is now striping the data between all of these drives at once, and it's also reading the data from all of these drives at once. But as I said guys, one hard drive fails, we now lose all the drives. Whereas if we have a RAID 1 array, what we do is we'll have at least minimal of 2 disks. So we now pretend our RAID array is 1. We've got a little RAID 1 controller up there. We'll get a little stick again. When we write data to the hard disks, and again guys, these are all the same sizes, the performance is not slower, but it is not as fast as RAID 0, because this data is now being written at the speed of just a single hard drive. But at the same time guys, it's writing to both disks at the same time, but creating a mirrored backup. Now this is useful because if this hard drive fails, we've still got this drive. All we need to do is replace another drive into the RAID and let the RAID array reconfigure the system. But guys, the problem with RAID 1 is we now only have half the hard disk space, because instead of 2 terabytes, we're having a backup. So we're losing 50% of our RAID, of our hard disk space. But remember guys, the bonus is that if this fails, then our system's still running. So, you know, this is a great sort of solution for if we had a company, say we only had 2 hard drives, you know, the machine needs to stay on and the data, this hard drive fails, we're still online. The larger the hard drive, the longer the time it's going to take to replace the data in the RAID array once we replace the drive. Just trying to think what else I can mention about that. But as I said guys, yeah, it's not as quick as RAID 0. Again, remember, RAID 0 guys, we're splitting the hard drives into block layers, and it's striping data between the drives. So RAID 0 is striping the data, so one file being split read and write, but RAID 1 is mirroring the data at the physical hard drive speed. Now again guys, this is great, but what I'm going to be setting up, and we're in the BIOS for this server, is we're going to be doing RAID 10 or RAID 1+0. Now this is quite hard to explain, so this is a minimal of 4 disks. Now what's happening here guys is we're going to be creating the RAID array, and when we create this array, we're going to be mirroring data between one of the drives, but we're also going to be striping the data, and it's kind of hard to explain. So let's mirror them both, but stripe. How can I explain this? Okay guys, let's label this A, let's label this B, let's label this B, let's label this A. Now we can lose A at any time, and we've still got the redundancy, and we've still got our files. I can also lose B, and we've still got all our files, and it's still mirroring the data. Now what this is doing guys is we're using RAID 0 and RAID 1 at the same time. So we could still lose this drive, we could lose this drive, we could lose one at any going time. But what can't happen guys on a RAID 10 is we cannot lose both sections of the mirrored set. So if there's no A's, A can't work without B, and vice versa. And it's it's hard to understand, but this is one of the most favored ways of raiding, because you've still got the performance of mirroring, so striping the data between the drives, but you've also got a mirror going on. But the failure of both A's or both B's is where things can seriously go wrong. But this is a good raid to have, guys, and if you've got backups anyway going on, then I would highly recommend this raid. Now this is what's going to be happening in here, guys. So we've got the 4 hard drives. I've got it set up for the 1+0. We're going to be creating the raid 10, i.e. striping and mirroring data, and this is gonna give us a bit more performance and also a bit of fault tolerance. So I hope that explains a little bit more about the raid, guys, because we're being hammered with the questions and this one was quite heavy. It's quite hard to get your head around, guys. So remember, raid 0 is striping data. It's splitting a file into A and B and then copying, like writing those 2 files to the disks at one time. But if you lose A, you also lose B. Whereas mirroring the data, you can lose A and B will still continue. You can lose B and A will still continue. Striping raid 10 with raid 1 and raid 0 is striping and mirroring, but you just need to figure out the pattern, but you can't lose 2 sets of the physical mirrored set. I hope that makes sense. I've got a documentation which I'll be posting to go with it, but I hope that explains a little bit more about the raid array, guys. So I'm just going to create that raid array as well, because I'm just about to make a new server for this company. So we've now got our logical raid. I wouldn't worry about the size volumes, it doesn't seem to be appearing. They're all 300 gigabit terabyte hard drives, gigabyte, sorry. And again, guys, remember what I'm saying. So raid 0, we would have 36912 100 gigabytes. Raid 1 or raid 10, what we've only got 600, because the data is being striped, but it's also being mirrored. So I hope that gives you guys a better understanding. To get into the RAID arrays on the motherboards of these HP Proliants or whatever they're called, you need to be hammering the F8 key, guys. Go into the BIOS, set up the RAID array first, then come in here and create the logical drives, because if you do not create the logical drives, the system or any bootable medium will not pick up the hard drives. If anyone else needs any more advice, give me a message. I hope that explains the basics of the RAID structure and how to use it. Obviously, guys, do not use RAID 0 if you need data, because remember, one file, 50 hard drives, one drive goes, you've lost that file. Mirroring is always good, but always take backups as well. I'm writing the software for the backup server at the moment, so that will be free as well. But any questions, guys, just give us a message, and I hope that explains everything. Peace.